This is my newsroom right across the street, the Columbia Missourian. For those of you who don't know, it's a newsroom, the morning newspaper for Columbia. There's also an afternoon newspaper, and we are run by faculty editors and staffed by 250, I think, students per semester enrolled in staff classes. So I teach a class called Participatory Journalism that is focused on news as a two-way experience, the ways that we are in conversation with and getting feedback from our communities. And for me, analytics is a part of that. It's one of the best, quickest, easiest forms of feedback that is underused by newsrooms. So what you see on the right over there is a display that we have going all the time in the newsroom, and up there is the Chartbeat big board. And it rotates through, the display rotates through our homepage, the competitor's homepage, our story budget, sort of a planning calendar, and then 2 views of Chartbeat. The thing I like about that is that as all of these next generation of journalists are wandering around the newsroom, they have the instant feedback of, sort of a quick visual reminder. People are using this right now. We're not doing this in theory. We're doing it for real people who are either reading or not reading. So a couple of the views we use, the left is the big board, the right is sort of a dashboard view that shows us where things are coming from, mobile versus desktop, that sort of thing. This is the mobile version. I use the app on my phone a lot. So we had a really strange experience last week where our most read story of the year so far, published on a Sunday evening, 49,000 page views in like 4 days, which for a site my size is humongous. So I was from an event across the street monitoring where it was coming from and getting constant reminders that it was spiking and getting, so here you can see it was this from reader story. So it went at one point 38 people on it at a time, and the next time I checked there were 307 people on the site and 237 people on that one story. And then the traffic sources tab above there told me how many were from, well, there are 2 Facebooks there. I think one's desktop, one's mobile Facebook, 2 different URLs. And Twitter, this was a story driven 80% by Facebook. So then this is the dashboard view, and it shows us, the board here, it shows us average engaged minutes. When I'm clicked on a specific story, it shows how far down people are scrolling on that story, which is a really interesting, actionable piece of information. Because you can get all excited about a lot of views to a long story, but if you see that the average engaged minutes is 1, and that the page depth really kind of tapers off about halfway through, that's information that we should care about as journalists. So we talk about that. We use Google Analytics, and in our week-over-week reports and month-over-month reports, we definitely talk about this was healthy time on site for a video of this length or for a story of this length, but it's hard to do anything about it at that point. We can just sort of theorize, oh, isn't that interesting that that really long story actually kept people on it? But this is the quick information that says people are sticking with this, or an indication that something's getting a lot of comments because there's a bunch of activity at the bottom of the page depth chart. I also get weekly emails that tell me where traffic peaked. And I find this, this is just totally different than what we get from Google. I know how many page views, how many unique visitors over time with Google, but this shows me when were there, at what moment were there the most people on the website. So I have 3 points to share with you about how my newsroom what benefit we mostly get from Chartbeat. So the first is instant actionable information about sharing. So we see that a story is spiking and that the visits are coming from Facebook. So sometimes that's from our Facebook post. I gotta tell you, more often than not, it's not. And this is our first clue by looking at the source and on the display in the newsroom that we have a shareable story. And that's instant information for us because it can pique curiosity about, if it's unusual, it can pique our curiosity about why is that story getting shared. It might be a story that we didn't expect to be very popular, or a story whose time we thought had passed. More often, it's a key for us that something has good potential, and we need to be sharing it and haven't been paying enough attention to the fact that it's shareable. The next is keywords. So it'll tell us on a specific story view what words landed people there. Useful, right? It will also tell us what words people search for to get to the site, right now. So that can be a real key. Again, just different from Google. It's a window into instant activity. It also will sometimes reveal things people are searching for that we didn't expect them to be searching for. So I love the comment this morning that what we should be looking for is anomalies, what's unusual. So for us, one of the ways Chartbeat's most helpful is when I say, whoa, why is that story up there? And I have this one totally scary, horrific example of when there was an annual festival coming up, and I realized that there were people on our preview story from last year because we hadn't done one yet this year. How freaky is that? So there are all these people on a schedule that says, here's what time things are happening at the festival on Saturday. And I'm like, no, it's not. So at least very quickly we can get in that story and somehow indicate in the headline or at the top of the story that it's last year's schedule. And then who do I need to bang over the head to get this year's schedule? On the website, right? So that requires quick action. If I get that information tomorrow, it does me absolutely no good. And I wouldn't notice it if I hadn't just kind of walked by the big board at the right time. And it was more than like one person. So somebody had like shared the link for last year's schedule. Happy, happy, happy. And then spikes in attention. And this is the big one for me. Because when we see something that has surprised us, it's on us to earn that attention and to keep it and to keep people there. So this story we had that got 49,000 page views in 4 days, definitely a lot of that is kind of one-off traffic. It was just a story that really resonated about a tragic issue, and plenty of the people who came just really wanted to read that story and had no connection to my brand. But once I see how well it's doing, I can very quickly get in and make sure things are linked that readers might also care about. At least here's what else has to do with this topic. And then Elizabeth, one of our news editors, and I were exchanging emails on a Sunday night with a couple of popular stories saying, what else? Let's take we do a weekly file that's like the most read stories of the week or something, right? Let's at least make sure that is linked so that people coming to the site, potentially for the first time, have somewhere else to go. I also added an info box with that most popular story. It was a story that a reader had written, actually, and I got on and included a little invitation saying, hey, we like to publish stories from readers. Here's how you can do that. And then contest and see how many people took me up on that. So the bounce rate for that story was somewhere between 80 and 90%, which is not atypical of something that gets a lot of referral traffic or search. And yet, of the 49,000 people who came, that's still an awful lot of people who stuck around. More than our typical audience still stuck around. So the really quick answer for us in terms of the value of Chartbeat is noticing that there's a lot of quick attention and being able to respond quickly to what might turn some of this occasional haphazard search or referral traffic into people who view more than one page on the site. So we've been talking about this all day, right? Like the main value of having this board up in the newsroom is that it teaches us to be paying attention, to know that, to watch when we share something if people respond to it. I had this terrible night a couple of weekends ago. I was helping cover a football game. It was one of Mizzou's early football games, and we had this aggregation of social media activity that we'd been kind of working hard on all day. I was sitting during the game and pulling in social posts onto this page on our website, and all evening long, there were like 2 or 3 people on it. And this is my Saturday night, you guys, and it was really, really low. So partly it's that it was an early game and really nobody cared, and nobody was sharing anything of much interest. But part of it is that I get to decide what's valuable. So I experiment while I'm sitting on my couch. I try sharing links to the page in different ways. I try tweeting at the people whose posts we're including and saying, hey, we've added you here. And then I click over to Chartbeat and see if it did anything. And so sometimes it did. And then that's something it's worth repeating and sharing with the team who will be doing it next week. Be sure you stop every 15 minutes and send a link like this because that works. But sometimes it's not working. So the more we talk, every time I talk with newsrooms about ways they could be engaging with their audience or ways they could be looking for feedback, they say, how am I supposed to make time for that? Well, one of the answers to that, I think, is that if you're listening right, you can stop doing some things that aren't working. And that's what the culture of experimentation means to me isn't the value of an experiment that you do again what worked and stop doing what didn't work? So when you can get the quick feedback, you stop doing what's not working. So this big board and the culture of my newsroom infuses the whole newsroom. Lots of people who don't have much to do with analytics except as receivers of reports. But also this class I teach, the participatory journalism class, uses it more heavily to be responsible for reporting back to the rest of the newsroom. Here's what we're seeing that's happening. And quick plug, if any of you are looking to hire people who know how to do this, I have a team of people. They're graduating twice a year. Some of whom are watching in the live stream. Hi, Vanita, who now have jobs doing analytics. So I find that when I meet with resistance from editors talking to them about how to use some of this feedback, it's often because they have a lack of understanding or context. So the danger of a board like this is also its beauty, that it's simple. So you look and say, hey, look, this kind of story is really popular. But that, of course, rewards the popular stories and doesn't pay as much attention to the ones that just naturally aren't as popular. So the important thing is then to pull up the city council preview that has 3 people on it. Hello, government editor. And compare that to what was happening with last week's council preview and how much time are people spending with it. And that's harder to do with Chartbeat because it's not as extractable. But I think that the more we can do with editors to compare apples to apples, instead of holding up as sacred, Mizzou football stories are going to do well on my website, so let's not compare that to city council previews. So the idea of experiments have to start with some sort of goals. So the thing that I'm still trying to crack in my newsroom is to figure out what it is we want to happen. And I wonder how many of you who are journalists have an answer to that. I went to this great analytics training last year, Google Analytics training, and I was in a room full of marketers, right? So the whole training is focused around conversion. Because on most websites, there's like something you want people to do. And you want to get to the page that says thanks for your purchase or your donation or something, right? I don't have a page I want everyone to get to. So not just what does my newsroom hope will happen, but for different types of stories, what do you hope will happen? So that when I'm looking at the city council preview, I have an answer to that is different than what our sports editor wants. So it's kind of this fundamental question of why are we here and what are we hoping to accomplish and how do we let the tools work for us? But Chartbeat, at least, has been a really effective way to remind my newsroom that we can know what people are valuing and how they found it. So it's one of a suite of tools. We use Social Flow for social media optimization and analytics, and we use Google, and we use Chartbeat. And Facebook Insights, lots of Facebook Insights. So that's what I have.